Learning in progress. Since it's the last day of class, we won't have a discussion next week. But we will just have you go in like we did at the beginning of the semester and post your attendance. Also remember, since we are at the end of the semester, that we want the reflections on, there's a final seminar reflection, a reflection on attending a dissertation or a thesis, teaching seminar to someone else, as well as your reflection on facilitating a discussion. Make sure that you get all of those things submitted as well. Oh, where's IPSO? Where's the IPSO reps? Allison, what do we've got today?
Next Wednesday is the Christmas party after seminar, and we need 3 more people to sign up for food and then helper. But everybody please come to the party next week. Come to seminar and then stay for soup party.
Seminar, stay for soup.
And then waffles is on the 14th because that's the last day of class.
And waffles, come get a waffle Thursday morning.
Is there a white elephant?
That is at the Christmas party.
That's that, so the people should bring a white elephant gift if they.
White elephant gift,
We can send out a reminder.
$5 gift.
Less.
So those of you who want to really impress people, like a $50 gift.
Something that was sitting around in your garage headed to DI. Like that.
Christmas party, waffles. Make sure you attend. Jesse, you have a problem maybe?
Or stand under that.
Microphone.
Just in case you don't know, I'll be leaving in January, but you're for a different position, but your program of study is due January 15th if you're a first year student. And so if you wish, you could talk to me about your program of study. Please sign up sometime in December. I'm happy to go through it with you and talk to you about it. And yeah, help you turn it in. But after January, can't. Right. So.
Okay. All right. Are there any other announcements or things we want to talk about? Got to stall just for another minute or so for our presenters here, right? So you're sharing your slides.
Here's an echo.
Ask a quick question, Jason.
Hey. I think that small echo is something we're just gonna have to live with. I don't know how else to get seminar demons again. It was a seminar miracle, but.
As long as we don't go into tangerine dream mode with the.
All right, so we're going to turn the time over to our seminar presenters today. Bryan Tanner, who's a recent graduate of our department, in the last 2-ish years or so, and Dr. Steve Yancher, who are going to talk to us about the hero's journey. So if you'll join me in welcoming them both to our seminar this afternoon.
Well, thank you. It's really fun to be here in front of you all. I'm usually sitting in the back. But I'm glad to be here today and to be presenting on this topic. So I'll just say a couple of quick things about Dr. Tanner, and then he can say a little bit more about his introduction and get into the presentation, which he's going to mostly deliver to you. He was a doctoral student in our program. I was his chair. What he's going to be presenting on is research based on his dissertation work. That was, if I recall correctly, completed in 2021. I think that was the year that you finished. Okay, right. And so it's a good example of the kind of research that we do around the department here that's qualitative in nature and that is focused on what we consider instructional design practices or practices of practitioners within the field. So there's a lot of different sort of patterns and trends in the research that people do for dissertations in our department, but this is one of the patterns that you see some of us working on. And the topic I think is really good also. So I think that's valuable for you to see just like what a dissertation looks like when it's finished and the kind of findings that you get and so on, and how that might inform work that some of you might do in the future. But also, I just think the findings of this dissertation itself are really useful and interesting, having to do with the ways in which, as you will see, professionals integrate into the field once they're done with their education, kind of transitioning. And so that's all I'm going to say. I'll let Dr. Tanner take it from here.
Thank you, Dr. Yanchar. I feel like Dan Aykroyd in that one movie. Doctor. I actually do use the term doctor in my Spotify profile. My name is Brother Dr. Tanner. So I get to use that term once. Well, I'm just so excited to be back in the IP&T department and get to see a lot of familiar faces who work with me over at Continuing Ed. And I'm just excited looking at the potential of everybody in this room. I'm really excited for you, and I hope that I can do two things today. One primarily is to I changed the subtitle of my presentation from navigating your story to something a little bit more specific. Help cope with the inevitable trauma that will come as you pursue a career in instructional design. This isn't specific to instructional design. Everybody goes through this in whatever field they're in, but my dissertation specifically explored the qualitative experience of instructional designers who graduated with graduate degrees in the field and how they clashed with the differing expectations that exist in the corporate world. By a raise of hands, let me get a feel for who's in the room. Is anybody feeling like working in corporate is a strong option for them after graduation? For me, I was like, I love to teach and I'd also like some money. So I decided to go the corporate route. Everybody has their own motivations, but that was one of the reasons that I got into it. Now, when I first talked to Dr. Yanchar about speaking, I was like, sure, I'll just share my dissertation defense presentation and just give you the bullet points of what I discovered, and hopefully you can transfer some knowledge to your own selves and it'll be great. But as I reviewed, a year and a half, 2 years later, the findings that I had, I realized that the findings that I discovered weren't actually unique. It had been published in 1949 by Joseph Campbell in his epic book, Hero with a Thousand Faces. Yeah. My framework that I thought was so unique almost perfectly overlays this monomyth, this hero's journey. And so today I'd like to take my dissertation findings one step further and share with you first, in like 2 minutes, my general findings that Dr. Yanchar alluded to, and then turn it on all of us in the room and say, okay, if this framework is real, here's something you can look forward to or not. But also, it's really interesting. Hero's journey can be used prescriptively, like I should expect this in my future. But also, and more importantly, it should be used descriptively. And that's the way that I'm hoping that we can use it today to kind of help us make meaning out of the trauma that you will experience or that you have already experienced. My second objective is just to give you kind of an idea of what a dissertation could look like and what that journey looked like for me, so it can help you along the way.
Did you do the 3-volume novel version?
I did not. Yeah.
3 novel.
The 3 novels.
Good question, Tyler.
For me, that decision was whether I wanted to have a bunch of publications under my name upon graduating. Because I was planning to go into the corporate field, having publications wasn't as important to me, to my chair's dismay. Probably. So yeah, just telling the full story in one big dissertation was what worked for me. If you have any additional questions, please just throw them out. I don't have a script, obviously. I'm here for you. Your questions are the priority. Your interests are my priority. Okay. Here's my best attempt at summarizing my dissertation in 3 minutes. Go. So, by the way, this took me 25 minutes in the dissertation defense. I explored how people transition from their instructional design preparation to practice in the corporate world. My dissertation had 5 sections. In the introduction, I essentially tell my story about how I transitioned and how that was really rocky for me. And I wanted to learn from other people. So that led me to a methodology of case studies, do qualitative exploration so that I could learn from the wisdom that other people had along their paths. So I first looked through just tons of information. It was really important to me that nobody else had done this information. I didn't want to get scooped. So I visited Rachel Wadham in her little room in the library when she was working there. I understand she's a student now in the department.
Still in the library.
Oh,
She's both.
okay. Loved meeting with her. She totally helped me clarify my research question. If you aren't taking advantage of Rachel in the library or wherever she is here, do that. Schedule time. She's a treasure. Captured a bunch of research articles, looked through some publications that I thought I would be publishing in just to make sure nobody else was doing what I wanted to do. I ended up coming up with 361 articles that closely related to my research topic, and I wasn't scooped. So that's good news. Came up with my research question. What do IDs do? How do they transition from their academic preparation to corporate practice? So usually I have notes in front of me. I'm not actually looking at notes right now. If anybody knows the hotkey to show my notes, I'd appreciate it. But basically, I had 5 participants. All of them were at least had a master's degree. They varied their experience in the field professionally. I tried to diversify gender and other demographics as best I could. And I came up with these great pseudonyms and kind of descriptions of the personalities here. I met with them on Zoom during COVID for our interview processes. I followed some patterns that are commonly accepted in gathering qualitative research. For my data analysis, I adopted Jonathan somebody and somebody's IPA analysis. And there's basically 6 steps to analyzing qualitative data according to them. First is you just become one with the data. You read the transcripts over and over again until you know them backwards and forwards. Then you start to take notes. In the left-hand column, you take notes that are just interesting to you as a researcher, things that stand out to you. And then in the right-hand column, you start to take notes about things that seem to be patterns and throwing into themes. Then you plug them all into a big table and you start to organize those themes and rinse and repeat with all of the.
What software?
Oh my gosh. I wish I had like a really awesome software. I was so poor as a graduate student. I couldn't even pay like $50 for a license to whatever tool allows you to do that. So I did it old school, manually captured stuff in a Word document, then shifted those quotes to an Excel table and had to like cut and paste. Horrific. Totally spend the money, find resources either within the department or maybe the school has a different one. Tableau, I think, is a really effective tool to crawl words. What software are you guys familiar with for data analysis? Qualitative data analysis. Vivo is good.
Max QDA.
QDA.
Max QDA.
Which?
Deduce.
Deduce.
Deduce
Use that
and-
one?
I'll use that one.
Is it good?
It's decent. I like Max QDA better.
Yep, I haven't played around with a ton, but I can tell you, it took me hours and hours of more time than I would have had I had a better tool. And so if your time is worth any money to you, then pay it. Lincoln and Guba's trustworthiness standards, and here are my findings. I'm already like at 5 minutes. This is way behind. Okay, so I thought my hypothesis that I secretly held on to, that I tried to not be very biased about was, okay, there are certain expectations in academia that are just really different than those in the corporate world. And while there are some that are very different, there might be some that are the same. And that's why I was imagining this Venn diagram. And I was hoping that all these participants would come and flesh out this Venn diagram for me. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Everybody's story was very unique, and I had to work really hard to weave them together into some kind of composite narrative. But eventually I did, and I named it the 7 stages of ID transformation or growth. And here they are. Step number 1, job role confusion. Upon entering the corporate world, every single instructional designer found that they had no idea, no one had any idea what an instructional designer is or does. Everyone had different ideas. And if we had time, which I know now we're not going to, I would have you guys pair up and I would individually ask you to define what an instructional designer is. What do you think an instructional designer is? Then I'd have you share it with the people at your table. And then I'd have you guys share with the whole group. And I almost guarantee you, we would come up with wildly different definitions, even within this homogeneous group where we're all kind of like, you know, stewing in the same, you have the metaphor. We're all kind of the same. But this was shocking to every one of my participants, and so I want to warn you right now. Just because you think you know what an instructional designer is, it's not going to be the same as the people who hire you. So, advice. Go into that job interview expecting that your hiring manager has a different expectation. If they know at all, they might not have a definition. They're like, I borrowed this job description from somebody on LinkedIn. I just need these PowerPoints turned into like online trainings for our training portal. And you're like, I want to work for you. No, this is really important. If you know what you want, take the time in the interview process to find out if it matches with what your company is looking for. Ask them, what do you think? What does your company think an instructional designer is? What does an instructional designer do kind of on the daily? Paint me a picture. And if there's clash, walk away. Don't do it for the money. There are other opportunities. If you are following your bliss, as Joseph Campbell says, doors will open to you and opportunities to do what you want to do as an instructional designer will reveal themselves. Have faith. All right, so job role expectations. So this reality is that instructional designers are prepared to do one thing, and you're like, I know how to be an instructional designer. I know the right way to design stuff, to get things done, to change people's minds, to change their behaviors, you know. And what you're asking me to do is not that thing. It's like putting a square peg into a round hole. Okay. Expect that. Inherent with that clash of expectations is frustration. Okay. There's popular phrases that talk about happiness equals reality minus expectations. Follow me with that equation there? Okay, if the difference, the gap between your expectations and the reality is your unhappiness. Okay, and this is a reality that all of my participants had to wrestle with, and they did it in different ways. 3 ways to be specific. One, you had the people who just caved. They rolled over and they're like, I don't really have any personal values regarding my identity as an instructional designer or what I think I should be doing. You pay me the money, I do whatever you want me to do. I did this when I worked for the Cadillac dealership down in Provo. They were like, oh, you want me to go to your daughter's house and wash her cars for you? Absolutely. Yeah, that's totally my job role. Okay. I had some participants who had that frame of mind. Okay. And that's fine. I pity them. I think that's sad because I think it's really great to find something that you truly love and pursue that. Now, the others attempted first generally to manipulate the environment that they were in. They found sneaky ways to kind of do what they wanted to do to be excellent instructional designers within the constraints that they had. So one participant, he got this like subtle reputation as really excellent instructional designer, but they had processes within their organization that prevented them from getting his help in the time that they needed. So they discovered that if they could just come to him and say, hey, I need this, and it's within this like loophole situation where you don't need a lot of funding or whatever. Anyway, they bribed him with food or something, and he was like, yeah, I'll just do this for you under the table. And he was able to create these great things without all this oversight and other constraints that would have made the project terrible. But eventually, the same instructional designer found these irreconcilable differences with his manager, and he just said, okay, I gotta find another job. And ultimately, if you're not happy where you are, move. People, my advice to you on this point is, as soon as you find out that you are unhappy, do something about it, okay? Don't just accept that, oh, this is what an instructional designer is, and I have to be happy with my lot. No, they don't even know what an instructional designer is. How should they, why should they be like forcing you to follow their preconceived notions? Fix it from within, or find a place where you can do what you want to do. Whether that's like thinking creatively and designing new looks and feels, or doing a lot of upfront analysis and understanding your customers, and doing UX, UI kind of work, if that's your thing, right? Find your place where you can do that, or create that in the space you are. So when this was kind of a interesting finding, as people tried to assert themselves and say, this is what I want, and it's different than what you're expecting of me, they had 2 different approaches depending on the group that they were talking to. If they were talking to a person who had more authority than they did, like a hiring manager or a C-suite executive, they relied on data-driven storytelling to really convince emotionally and rationally those decision makers. Stories by themselves are very compelling and can get the job done, but if you have a strong number on your PowerPoint slide, that goes a long way in haunting the dreams of those decision makers at night. If you are trying to convince your peers or other stakeholders on a project that their approach to solving this instructional dilemma is not going to be very effective, and you're just like, yes, it is, no, it isn't, or whatever. Really, what you need to do is you need to somehow pull a political move and get the authority. Put yourself in a position of authority. Get that job title of project lead, or that's one way that the participants anyway. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. I'm just saying this is a theme that came out in the research. A lot of throwing people's weight around with titles and authorities were what mainly allowed them to affect change. I think there are other ways. Throughout this whole job role negotiation process, all of the instructional designers yearned for validation. Not only is it really nice to know that you're doing a good job, but you want to know, like, am I even, adding value to this company, right? Like, is my idea of what an instructional designer, is that idea the same as your idea? Which may not be apparent in the job interview process. So nobody expressed like overwhelming feedback in their data for me that they were super satisfied with the feedback they got. They could have all used more. The very few that did receive crumbs of validation, it sustained them long enough to stay at the company until that scale of dissatisfaction outweighed the scale for satisfaction. Most people didn't receive formal feedback in terms of, like, here's how you're performing as an instructional designer in your job role. This stems from the reality that their managers don't know what instructional designers are. So we're able to really say, yeah, you're doing a good job. All they're saying is, you're not destroying the company. Great work. Right? This is a very high bar. So my advice for you is, don't rely on other people's validation for you. Set your own goals, decide how you want to grow, and derive your satisfaction from that. An exercise that I used at one point in my career that helped me self-evaluate whether I was happy in the role that I was in. This was in July, mind you. I wrote an end of year Christmas letter. Like, here's how our family is doing, right? And it was a really holistic look at my happiness in general. It wasn't just like, do I like my job? It was like, how's my relationship with my family? Am I able to spend time pursuing hobbies that I love and my passions? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I exercising? Am I feeling healthy? Right? All these things came out in this imaginary letter that I never sent to anyone. And I recognized, no, I was stressed out constantly and I was miserable. And that for me was a catalyst to change, to do something. So here's the thing that everybody got to eventually in their journeys as in corporate instructional designers. Nobody stayed with the first job that they got. In fact, the people who were furthest along in their careers made the most moves, which was kind of interesting. People who were unhappiest with their roles as instructional designers stayed the longest in those roles. People who were happiest were able to recognize quickly their dissatisfaction and then change their situation in some way. So that's my advice to you. Do not just wait around accepting some clueless hiring managers job description for you. Follow your bliss, find what you want in your life, develop those skills, try to apply them in your current job while marrying that with your organization's vision and try to align that. But use your specific skills and interests to build the company and those around you. If you aren't able to do that, make a change. All right, that was a long 3 minutes. Any questions up to this point about my dissertation, how I worked with Dr. Yanchar, how I presented, any parts of my method or anything? Otherwise, we'll jump into the university.
Maybe a little bit different than different question, but how are you using your research skills and experiences now in what you're doing? Because are you working in corporate, and like how are you using that, or is it kind of your dissertation just part of your past?
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. First, let me go back to when I was a student. I was so stressed out that my dissertation needed to be like the pied de resistance of my career. Like this is the peak. I'm sure you've heard this from all your professors. This is just a long paper that everybody has to do as a gateway to enter, you know.
Plug your ears, everybody, plug your ears.
This is the beginning of your research agenda, okay? It does not have to be the last thing that you ever publish, does not have to be the best thing that you ever publish. Ask the faculty around campus about their dissertations, and they'll like start to go like this. Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed by that thing. But the skills I learned throughout the process are still serving me today. I work for the continuing education department in the Harmon building, the big glass one across from the MTC. And I am part of an instructional design team that builds online courses for BYU students. And yesterday I was telling my team, hey, I'm going to be speaking to some IP&T students. And here's the title of my presentation, and they just laughed at me. They're like, that sounds so scholarly. I can't believe, of course you would write something like that. And so they rely kind of on, anytime they need to do research, they say, Bryan's our guy. And so my team lead said, hey, listen, we're getting this feedback from on-campus instructors. They're like, we hate discussion boards. They all are terrible. Our students are giving us bad ratings. Do something. So she was like, Bryan, you're on it. I need you to research online social interaction in the post-COVID research. And I need you to come up with like 5 findings that we can then take to these instructors and say, this is why peer-to-peer interaction specifically is an essential component of online learning. And here are some examples of things that have worked well, across the literature. And I'm like, yes, I'm living my best life. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
How did you choose IPA? Because certain person we know isn't a big advocate of IPA.
Yeah. I read some dissertations of people before, graduates in the program before me, and saw that they were using a similar methodology, that they used IPA. I asked myself, is this a method that will work for me, an approach, I should say? And it was, and it made sense, and I could defend it, and so I used it. Yes, it's not the most rigorous approach, but it's commonly accepted in the social sciences, and that's all I needed to say in the dissertation defense. Would you add anything to that, Dr. Yanchar?
I don't have any objection to IPA. I think it's good for certain research questions and for certain situations with certain researchers, and just gotta do what fits the best. I think this was a good fit.
I loved, you know what, I don't think I ever mentioned this to any faculty I worked with in my committee, but I read all of Brene Brown's books while I was a doctoral student. And I was like, I need to be a grounded theory researcher. How can I shoehorn my research question into this approach? And really, it didn't work out very well. So I still love her books. I love her method. That didn't serve me. And that's the critical thing when you're coming up with a data analysis tool or approach or whatever, is can you defend it? And does it make sense to approach your research question in that way? Okay, we ready? I'm gonna try to. I don't even know what I'm gonna do. Oh my gosh, watch this. This is like, how can I help these IP&T students like work through their own traumas? Got, first of all, each of these main sections is a major heading. Campbell had like 17, but people who have taken his work further have kind of simplified it into these 12 stages. And what these 12 stages represent are themes found in every great heroic journey or story throughout time, whether that's in religions or philosophy or works of fiction. Campbell spent 5 years reading 18 hours a day. And these are the steps or stages that he was able to describe after the fact. Okay. So again, don't look to your future and say, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous for the ordeal that's coming up. And, oh, it's going to be so terrible or whatever. No, this is a descriptive tool to help you process your trauma and make sense of your journeys as instructional designers. So the way I formatted it here was I basically say, here's what the hero's journey is. I'll make this presentation available to you guys if you're interested. I'm not actually going to go through it. But I had like 4 parts in each of the 12 stages. So here's why I think this is important and how it can help you guys. And then I go, okay, so under stage number 1, I describe the hero's journey. I include some quotes from Campbell. I share a common, relatable example from popular media. Then I share my personal story of how I see myself in this hero's journey. I talk about my participants and my study as kind of a generalization of here's what you might see as an ID. And then I give specific advice. This is the stuff that I would find most valuable for you. So if you do look at this, maybe just read the bulleted headlines. And if those stand out to you, you can read further. But then I just rinse and repeat and I just go, okay, here's step 2, here's my story, here's the participant's story, here's my advice to you, et cetera, et cetera. So, thing that I feel would be most valuable to you is tell you the juiciest, most vulnerable bits of my experience in the corporate world. And having experienced that trauma myself, what meaning that I'm making from it so that I can then go forward and become a better version of myself. So step 1 of the hero's journey, ordinary world. All of us have already been there. This is our pre-ID lives, okay? At some point, we're like doing something, and then we get a call to action, a call to adventure. For me, before I discovered the field of instructional design, I wanted to be a seminary teacher, but I wasn't married. So in the moment of getting hired, I had to graduate from BYU in a degree I didn't really care about just so that I could be ready to work as a seminary teacher. And they were like, you are a great teacher, Bryan, but not married. So we're going to give the job to somebody who's married. So I was like, oh, my dreams are shattered. So I go to my grandma. I'm like, Grandma, what should I do? She's like, you should be a fire chief. That makes sense. That's right. I won't save people's souls, but I'll save their bodies. This is a good pursuit. So I become an EMT. I'm Utah State certified. I start my first day of class at the UVU Fire Academy. And this is me coming off of like teaching at the MTC and teaching in seminary classrooms. I walk into this classroom and there's this group of guys gathered around a computer watching porn. And I was in shock. I did not say a word. I walked around and like Joseph of Egypt, I never turned back. I just ran away. And I thought my career dreams were shattered again. Miraculously, the next day I got a literal call to adventure. I do not know. I talked to my parents about this past week. I was like, I didn't even tell you what happened. So I just assumed that you didn't talk to this guy from my home ward. But Nate Niederhausen called me on the phone. He's never called me on the phone before. I barely knew who he was. He was like a youth leader after I had left home or whatever. He's like, Bryan, I don't know where you are in your life, but I just thought I'd let you know about my field as an instructional designer working at Microsoft. I love it. And after talking to him, I discovered, oh, this field is awesome. It combines teaching and technology, two of my greatest passions. He's like, if you want me to write you a letter of recommendation, USU is one of the best programs in the country at that time. And yeah, I'd be happy to do that for you. 4 months later, I was attending my first class at USU. But first, I had to refuse the call. I was afraid of the unknown. I wasn't sure if I was going to be any good at this. I had already had this heartache from being denied from these two things that I was pursuing with all my heart. I was really comfortable in Provo. All of my friends were here. What was I going to do in Logan in the winter? These were things that went through my head that I was like, no, I can't be an instructional designer. But I overcame that fear and I crossed the threshold. Meet the mentor yet? Oh, the mentor is Nate Niederhausen. He gave me, sometimes when you meet a mentor, and hopefully all of you can identify a mentor in your lives as well. For me, my mentor was somebody who simply gave me a vision of what I could be. As an instructional designer, Nate was my mentor. He said, I saw you grow up. I know who you are, and I think you do really well at this. And that was the simple encouragement I needed to overcome all those fears swimming in my head. If you take a second and think about it, I bet you can think of somebody in your lives who encouraged you to be where you are right now. With that encouragement, cross the threshold. Oh no, I'm sorry. So the way that I described mentor here, I call Nate my call to adventure. My mentoring experience was the training grounds for the corporate world, which is the graduate school. Okay, so you're surrounded by mentors. All of your faculty member, even your peers, can teach you things and equip you with knowledge and tools and skills that will help you survive in that professional world. Cross the threshold. I signed my first job contract as a government contractor. I got secret clearance. And so I felt like that was an ordeal in and of itself. And so I was like, there's no turning back now. I test my ID-ness in a variety of positions and jobs. Small challenges come along the way. Oh my gosh, this me is horrible to work with. they just do not, it's pulling objectives from them is like yanking teeth at a dentist's office. Like this is so hard. After a number of, my training montage of doing that, those skills started to come much easier. I found friends along the way who I'd eat lunch with and I'd gripe about things like, this is really bothering me in my career path. And he's like, oh, have you tried this? Or I commiserate with you or whatever. Sidekicks are always really good along the journey. You'll also find enemies. And those people will help you grow and become more of who you are as well. Approach to the inmost cave. So my favorite symbol of this is Empire Strikes Back, where Luke is finishing his training with Yoda, and he's like, "What's in there? It feels so cold." Right? This is it's a symbol of being ready and willing to face your darkest desires or your deepest fears. It could be something physical, but as instructional designers, a lot of us hold on to some kind of false truth or limiting belief that ultimately we're going to have to face, and that it challenges our whole identities as instructional designers. For me, my deepest fear was to not be recognized as a competent professional. I had this, maybe it's because of my Gen Y upbringing, where I felt super entitled about everything, like my ideas are the greatest. Maybe it was because I got a master's degree and I literally thought I was the master of instructional design. But I found myself in a role that felt bigger than my britches. And I felt afraid. I felt like people would see that I was an imposter and that I wasn't up to the task. That all of my confidence was just, it was just wind, right? That fear came to a head as I sat in an HR officer's conference room. And for me, I was like, this could go one of two ways. He could either stroke my ego and finally give me that validation I yearned for so much, to say, oh my gosh, you've been doing a great job in your role. You've had all these challenges. And yes, I recognize that people are challenging your authority as an instructional designer, and we're going to make some changes so that you can actually get the teeth that you need to make our organization better. Very wishful thinking. What happened was I had been on a project for about 6 months where the SME thought that she was the only instructional designer on the project. And all the while, I thought I was a co-designer. So I would be making changes to the project and it's like, this is going to be so much better. And she's like, you're messing with my milestones on my Gantt chart. It's totally messing, freaking me out or whatever. All this stuff was recorded on a file. And when the organization started making changes to different jobs and stuff, my job got put on the chopping block. And so I went in there, my worst fears were validated. I was like, your job is going away. We're gonna have to let you go. And I was like, am I a good instructional designer? Oh my gosh, what am I losing my career again? What's happening here? And it was in movies, this truth happens like immediately. But in real life, that truth took an entire doctorate degree to finally process and realize the real truth is I don't have to be right. I just have to get it right. And as I take that gem of knowledge, that reward with me, through all of my professional pursuits, and I'm able to let go of my ego. I'm able to put other people's priorities and make high up and make them my own. And I have not found a challenge yet that I haven't been able to overcome. As I let go of my completely selfish, pursuits of being seen and as competent and whatever, and realize that I'm just here to help the organization. And I might have some ideas on how to do that, and they don't have to, what we go with doesn't have to be what I decide. But that has brought me, there are negotiations that happen, and sometimes I feel strongly, but I can do that in a really safe psychological environment. And I'm still practicing. I'm not the best at it yet, but I love being put in those situations now. I look forward to it, and you will too. As you experience your trauma, as you discover your truth, as you put it into practice, you too can find really great satisfaction in your jobs as IDs. And that is my wish for you guys. Thanks.
And we're so thankful for your contributions and presentation today and the insights. Thank you so much. We're done with seminar, so let's go get something to eat. Again, just one more reminder for those who are on tap for the questions, get those questions to me. We'll get the question put up as soon as we can, and we'll see you next week for our last seminar. Thanks so much.
A good post-seminar